Sergeant Jack Donovan had seen it all. The blood, the fire, the screams. The human race had fought fiercely, pushing back against the ruthless alien empire that sought to conquer their world. But today was different. Today, the battle wasn't just about survival. It was about a choice that would change everything. Jack and his squad were on the front lines, weapons in hand, facing down the alien forces in the rocky terrain of a distant planet. His team was under heavy fire, with explosions rocking the ground beneath them. The air was thick with smoke, and the scent of burning metal lingered in the chaos. "Take cover!" Jack shouted, signaling his squad to retreat behind a cluster of boulders. His heart raced, his muscles aching from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The enemy was relentless, their alien weapons cutting through the air with deadly precision. As Jack crouched low behind the rocks, he scanned the battlefield, searching for any sign of weakness. That's when he saw it, a small figure darting between the wreckage of a fallen ship. It was an alien child, no older than 5 or 6 human years. The child was alone, scared, and vulnerable, and for a split second Jack wondered how it had ended up on the battlefield. The alien forces didn't care for their young to be left behind, so something was terribly wrong. Without thinking, Jack stood up from his cover, his rifle raised to fight, but his eyes locked onto the child. There was no hesitation in his heart. He had been trained to kill, to protect his own, but this was different. This wasn't an enemy combatant. This was a child. Before his mind could catch up with his decision, Jack sprinted toward the child, dodging gunfire as it whizzed past him. He could hear the calls of his squad mates, but Jack couldn't stop. He had to save the child. His heart pounded, each step bringing him closer to danger. But he didn't care. The child saw him coming and froze, eyes wide with fear. They were too young to understand war, too innocent to grasp the hatred that had torn apart their worlds. Jack knelt down in front of the child, trying to shield them from the chaos around them. "It's okay. I'm here to help," he said softly, his voice breaking through the noise of battle. Without warning, the ground beneath him shook as an explosion detonated nearby. Jack's body slammed into the dirt, his ears ringing from the blast. He barely managed to push the child to the ground, his body acting on instinct as he shielded the young one with his own. He could feel the heat of the explosion scorch his back, but he didn't move. His duty was to protect, and that's exactly what he did. A second explosion rocked the earth, knocking Jack to his side, but he kept the child pressed to the ground, his own body acting as a human shield. His muscles screamed in pain, but he didn't care. He wasn't going to let the child die here, not on his watch. For what seemed like an eternity, the world around him was nothing but explosions and gunfire. Jack could feel the blood seeping from his wounds, but his focus never wavered. He stayed low, refusing to move as the child trembled beneath him. Finally, the explosion stopped. The battlefield fell eerily quiet, the sounds of war fading into nothingness. Jack, battered and bloodied, lifted his head to see if the threat had passed. His body felt heavy, each breath coming slower than the last. But when he looked down, he saw the child was still there, still alive. He had done it. The child was safe. Jack allowed himself a moment to breathe, relief washing over him. But the moment was short-lived. His vision blurred, and his legs wobbled beneath him. His head spun, his body unable to handle the injuries any longer. He collapsed beside the child, his consciousness slipping away. The world around Jack was silent. He awoke to the soft hum of alien technology and the gentle sound of a voice. "You're awake," the voice said, soft and calm. It was a strange melodic tone that Jack had never heard before. He blinked, his vision still blurry, but as the fog lifted, he saw the child once more. They were sitting by his side, their wide eyes staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something Jack couldn't place. Jack tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his side stopped him. His body was a mass of bruises and cuts, and his head throbbed. He winced and looked down at his own blood-stained uniform. The child had managed to drag him out of the battlefield, but how? Jack couldn't remember. A figure appeared above him, casting a shadow. When Jack looked up, his breath caught. Standing before him was an alien, tall, regal, and imposing. Her skin shimmered in the low light, a rich shade of deep violet. She had the air of royalty, the kind of presence that demanded attention. Her eyes were a piercing yellow, glimmering with intelligence and power. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice rough. "I am Lady Valera," the alien woman answered, her tone unwavering. "You saved my child." Jack tried to focus, but his mind was spinning. "Your child?" he mumbled. I didn't know. I had to save them." Lady Valara's expression softened, a rare vulnerability flashing in her gaze. "You didn't know who you were saving, but you saved them anyway." She stepped closer, her gaze intense. "You protected my blood. That means you have earned a place of respect in my world, and I, Lady Valara, do not forget such actions." Jack's head spun as he tried to process her words. What do you want from me?" The alien woman's smile was both warm and calculating. "You will come with me. You will serve me, Sergeant Jack Donovan. For your bravery, I will grant you the honor of my protection." She looked down at the child. "And my gratitude." Jack couldn't believe it. He had expected to be left to die, a nameless soldier forgotten in the chaos of war. But now, an alien warlord stood before him, offering something far greater than he ever imagined. The price of his actions was yet to be revealed. Jack swallowed hard. The choice he had made earlier to save the child was now part of a much bigger game. The consequences of his decision were only just beginning. The world around him was foreign, full of strange lights and humming machines. His head still throbbed from the injuries he'd sustained, but his body no longer felt like it was falling apart. The alien woman, Lady Valara, had kept him alive. He was certain of it. He could see the alien tech at work, the smooth surfaces and glowing lights that covered the walls. His wounds had been treated with a level of care and precision beyond anything he'd ever experienced. For a moment, Jack just lay there, staring up at the ceiling. He was still alive, and the child, who had somehow ended up in the middle of a battlefield, was safe. He hadn't been able to stop himself when he'd run toward them, nor had he thought of the consequences when he had placed himself between the child and the enemy's fire. Now, as he tried to shake the fog from his mind, the reality of his situation began to settle in. The alien woman had saved him, that much was clear. And now she was offering him something. A place by her side, a protector's role that he hadn't earned, at least not in any way he could understand. Jack shifted uncomfortably in the bed, trying to sit up. His body protested with a sharp pain in his side, but the pain was bearable. He could move, and that was something. He glanced around, searching for Lady Valara. She wasn't in the room, but the child was sitting by a window, staring out at the vast expanse of space visible through the walls. The child looked over at Jack, their eyes still wide with a mixture of wonder and fear. The small alien appeared, to be younger than Jack had first thought, perhaps closer to 4 or 5 Earth years. Their skin was a pale shade of blue with soft, translucent patterns running across it, like light shining through water. They didn't speak, just watched him quietly, as if waiting for something. "Hey," Jack said softly, his voice raspy from the smoke and dust of battle. "Are you okay?" The child blinked and nodded, though their eyes never left him. Jack winced, propping himself up on his elbows, trying to get a better look. The child's innocence was evident, a stark contrast to the war and destruction surrounding them. They had no place here, not in the middle of a battlefield. Jack's thoughts wandered back to the moment he had shielded them, wondering how in the world the child had ended up alone on the battlefield. The door to the room opened, and Lady Valara entered, her presence commanding. She walked with grace, her movements smooth, almost regal. She paused for a moment as her eyes met Jack's, the gaze piercing and unyielding, before she spoke. "Sergeant Jack Donovan," she began, her voice calm but firm, "you have done something no one else in this war would have done. You've saved my child when you had every reason to let them die. You have earned my respect." Her words were measured, deliberate. She wasn't angry, but there was something in her tone that made Jack feel like he was about to face a trial. Jack struggled to sit up fully, his hands pressing against the bed to support himself. "I didn't do it for respect," he said, his voice hoarse. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. The child didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of a war." Valara studied him, her yellow eyes narrowing slightly. "You speak of morality, but you are a soldier. You understand what it means to fight, to kill, to survive." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "I understand war, but I don't understand killing innocent people or children just because they were born into it." He looked at the child, who was still sitting silently by the window, their eyes distant. "What kind of life is that? For a kid?" There was a long pause as Valara considered his words. "You may be right," she said softly. "But you must understand, Sergeant Donovan, that my people, my empire, has been at war for as long as I can remember. We have learned to survive by doing things others would consider unthinkable." She paused, as if weighing her next words, carefully. "And yet I see something in you. Something different. You saved my child when you could have left them to die." Jack frowned. "I'm just a soldier. I didn't think about the consequences." "You thought about something," Valara said, her voice a touch softer now. "You thought about the child's life, and that makes you different from the rest of your kind. Perhaps different from even my own." Jack didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being praised, especially not for something that felt like a simple act of survival. He had acted instinctively. The decision to protect the child hadn't been calculated, it had just happened. But hearing the alien woman speak made him realize that his actions had consequences. And those consequences were beginning to change the course of his life. Valara stepped closer, her presence still commanding, but now tinged with something softer, something human. "You did not act like a soldier today, Jack Donovan. You acted like a protector. And that is why I offer you this, a place at my side. You will serve me, not as a warrior, but as my personal bodyguard, my protector. You will live under my protection, and in return, you will help protect what is mine." Jack's mind raced. "You want me to serve you?" "Yes," Valara replied. "I demand it." Jack blinked in disbelief. "I'm a soldier, a human soldier. I'm not whatever you are." Valara's lips twitched into something resembling a smile. "You will become what you must to survive, Sergeant. You will learn that there is much more to this war than you could ever imagine." Jack could feel the weight of her words. He wasn't sure what to make of the offer, but there was no denying the strange pull of curiosity. This was more than just a matter of survival. It was a matter of understanding. The alien woman seemed to know things he couldn't begin to comprehend. She had seen far more than he had in his life, and Jack knew that there was something bigger at play here. The child, still watching, had now slowly walked over to Jack's side. They reached up and gently touched his arm, as if to reassure him. It was a small, almost insignificant gesture, but it was enough to remind him of why he had acted in the first place. "I'll help you," Jack said slowly, looking up at Valara. "But I need to understand more. I need to know what this is really about." "You will learn," Valara said, her voice firm once more. "And you will be a part of something much greater than you think. This war is far from over, and I have a feeling you may be the key to its end." He had been taken to a different part of the ship, a grand chamber that seemed to pulse with an energy that made his skin tingle. The walls were lined with alien technology, their smooth surfaces gleaming in the dim light. Jack had never seen anything like it before, and for the first time in his life he felt small, not just physically, but in a way that made him question everything he thought he knew about war, survival, and duty. Lady Valara had kept her promise. She gave him food, medical attention, and a place to rest. But she had also kept him on edge, always watching, always calculating. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. Now he was her protector, her bodyguard, as she had called it. But Jack wasn't sure what that meant. What did a human soldier like him have to offer to someone as powerful as Valara? The first few days were a blur of recovery. Jack spent most of his time in the sterile, quiet room he'd been assigned, his mind trying to catch up with everything that had happened. The child whom he had saved came to see him often. They didn't speak much, but their presence was comforting in a way. They would sit by the window, just watching the stars outside as if nothing had happened. Jack couldn't quite understand it, how someone so young could remain so calm in the face of such chaos. But there was something about their silence that made Jack feel like he wasn't alone in this strange new world. Valara, too, would visit him. She would speak with him about the war, about her people, and about what she expected from him. But her words always left Jack with more questions than answers. She spoke of loyalty, of survival, and of sacrifice. She spoke of things he couldn't quite grasp, things that seemed so far beyond him. Yet each time they spoke, he felt like he was being drawn further into her world. One day, after what felt like an eternity of silence, Valara came to him again. She stood in the doorway, her posture as commanding as ever, her golden eyes fixed on him. "You've recovered enough," she said, her voice low but firm. "It's time you learn what it means to be a part of my empire." Jack didn't know what that meant, but he was certain it wasn't going to be easy. "Come with me," Valara ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Jack followed her, his steps hesitant but determined. They walked through the corridors of the ship, passing by alien soldiers and servants, all of whom seemed to acknowledge Valara with a nod or a brief glance. It was clear that she was not just a ruler, she was a force to be reckoned with. As they moved through the ship, Jack couldn't help but wonder what she had planned for him. They arrived at a large, open room. In the center was a massive table, surrounded by holographic displays and maps of star systems. The walls were covered in intricate symbols and alien writings, none of which Jack could read. But there was something unsettling about the room. It felt like a war room, a place where decisions were made and lives were changed. "This is where we make our plans," Valara said, gesturing to the table. "Where I make my decisions." Jack looked around, trying to make sense of it all. "What kind of plans?" he asked. Valara's eyes met his, and for a moment Jack could see something flicker in them, a depth of knowledge and experience that he could never hope to understand. "The war is not just about battles, Sergeant Donovan," she said. "It's about power, it's about control, it's about survival." Jack took a step forward, his curiosity growing. "What do you mean?" "The galaxy is a brutal place," Valara said, her voice growing colder. "Those who do not have power are crushed beneath the boot of those who do. My people have been fighting for generations, but we are not fighting just to survive. We are fighting to rule, to dominate, to ensure that we never again become prey." Jack swallowed hard. He had seen the violence, the destruction, the slaughter. He had heard the stories of alien civilizations fighting for control of resources, of planets, of everything. He had always thought of it as just another war, another conflict between opposing forces. But this was something else entirely. This was a fight for power itself. "You're fighting to conquer," Jack said, more to himself than to Valara. Valara's eyes narrowed. "Conquer? No. We are fighting to ensure that we are never conquered again. I do not seek domination for the sake of domination. I seek control for the survival of my people, my empire." Jack didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't sure he agreed with her, but he had to admit there was something compelling about the way she spoke. There was a conviction in her voice that made him wonder if she truly believed in what she was doing, or if she was simply doing what she thought was necessary to survive. "You will help me," Valara continued. "You will help me fight this war, not as a soldier, but as my protector. You will fight by my side, learn what it means to be a part of my world, and serve my cause." Jack's heart raced. He wasn't sure what he was getting himself into, but he knew one thing. He couldn't back out now. Not after everything that had happened. Not after what he had done for her child. "Why me?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with doubt. "Why did you choose me?" Valara regarded him, for a long moment her golden eyes piercing into his soul. "Because you are different," she said simply. "You saved my child. You acted when others would have hesitated. You showed me that you understand what it means to protect, even at great cost. That is something I can use." Jack wasn't sure what to make of her words, but he couldn't deny that there was something in them that made him feel important. Something that made him feel like he wasn't just another soldier. He was part of something bigger. A bigger purpose, a bigger war. "Fine," Jack said, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll help you. I'll do what it takes." Valara's lips curled into a smile, one that was both approving and calculating. "Good. I knew you would understand." She turned, gesturing for Jack to follow her. "Come, there is much for you to learn." Under Valara's guidance, he was immersed in the intricacies of her empire. Every day, he learned more about the alien world he had found himself part of. It wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. This was about understanding power. Who held it, who controlled it, and who could manipulate it. For someone like Jack, who had only ever known the straightforward brutality of war, the complexity of this new world was overwhelming. Lady Valara had a plan. That much was clear. But Jack wasn't sure what his role was in it. At first, he had assumed he would simply serve as her protector, as she had promised. But as the days passed, he realized that being her protector meant more than just guarding her body. It meant learning how to navigate the delicate politics of an empire built on power, fear, and survival. Jack spent his days in meetings, sitting at the back of the room, listening as Valara discussed strategies, alliances, and betrayals. She spoke with the other leaders of her empire, each of them either afraid of her or in awe of her, but always respectful. Her authority was unquestionable. Her decisions were final, and yet Jack couldn't shake the feeling that she was constantly calculating her next move. It was one of those long meetings that changed everything. Jack sat quietly as Valara addressed her generals. The room was dimly lit, a holographic map of the galaxy hovering above the table. The map was dotted with colored markers, each one representing a planet, a battlefront, a supply route. Valara's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made the room fall silent whenever she spoke. "Commander Kor, I trust your forces have secured the eastern sector?" Valara asked, her eyes fixed on a tall, burly alien standing at the end of the table. "Yes, my lady," the commander replied. "The human resistance is stronger than expected, but we have pushed them back. Their supply lines are vulnerable." Valara nodded. Good. Continue to apply pressure, but do not overextend. I need those supplies intact for the next phase of our operation. The commander gave a sharp nod, then turned to leave. As he passed by Jack, he shot him a quick, dismissive glance. Jack didn't flinch. He had learned quickly that in Valera's presence, everyone held a certain degree of fear and respect. But none of them would ever be his friend, not in the traditional sense. They were all pieces on a board, and Valara was the player. When the room cleared, Valara turned to Jack, her gaze steady. "You've been quiet. What do you think?" Jack hesitated. The thought of giving his opinion on an empire's strategy seemed absurd. What did he know about galactic warfare? But there was something in Valara's eyes, something that told him she expected more than just silence. "I think you're playing a dangerous game," Jack said cautiously. "You're pushing forward, but you're not making allies. You're making enemies. If you're going to win this war, you need more than just force." Valara raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Go on." Jack leaned forward slightly. "There are planets here that don't want to be controlled. They don't want your empire. But they don't want the human resistance either. There's room to negotiate. You don't need to conquer everything. You could form alliances with some of these planets. Give them a choice. Fight with you, or face destruction. It's not just about who's stronger, it's about who's smarter." Valara studied him for a long moment, her golden eyes never leaving his face. For a brief second, Jack wondered if he had overstepped, if he had gone too far. But then Valara smiled, an expression that was both knowing and approving. "You're learning," she said softly. "That's exactly what I've been trying to teach you." Jack was taken aback. "You think I'm ready for that kind of responsibility?" Valara stood up, walking toward the holographic map. She waved her hand and the map shifted, zooming in on a cluster of planets in the outer rim of the galaxy. "I think you're ready to understand what it truly means to lead. But no, you're not ready to command, at least not yet." She turned to face him, her gaze softer now. "But I think you're beginning to see the bigger picture. This isn't just about winning battles. It's about understanding people. It's about manipulating them to see things your way, without them realizing it." Jack frowned. "Manipulation? You're talking about using people." "Yes," Valara said, her voice steady. "It's not cruelty. It's survival. When you're in charge, you do what you must. You make decisions that others can't or won't. You make people believe in a cause, even if it's not the one they'd choose for themselves. It's a fine art." Jack could hardly wrap his mind around it. He had always fought to protect his comrades, his family, his home, but Valara, she fought for something much bigger. And that something, he realized, wasn't just the empire. It was control, power, the ability to shape the future however she saw fit. For the first time, Jack felt the weight of what he had agreed to. He wasn't just serving as a soldier. He was becoming part of a system, one that was built on control, on making choices that affected the lives of billions. It wasn't black and white. It was messy, complicated, and dangerous. And yet there was something in Valara's conviction that pulled him in. She didn't believe she was a villain. She believed she was the only one who could save her people. Jack began to see that, in her eyes, everything she did, every decision, every battle, was for survival. Not just for herself, but for her empire. But as he spent more time with her, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being used. He wasn't just a bodyguard anymore. He was a tool, a weapon she could wield when the time was right. The question was, would he ever have a choice in the matter? As the days passed, Jack learned more about the delicate balance of power. He began to understand that his role wasn't just to protect Valara's life. It was to help her maintain control, to ensure that her empire would stand, no matter the cost. The next morning, Valara summoned him again. This time, she had a new mission for him, one that would test everything he had learned. A planet in her empire was growing restless. The people were starting to rebel, questioning her leadership. Valara needed someone to go in, to handle the situation before it spiraled out of control, and Jack, he was the one she chose. The planet Valara had sent him to was called Trellis 7, a distant world on the edge of her empire. It was a beautiful planet, with vast oceans and towering mountain ranges that seemed to stretch on forever. From space, it looked peaceful, untouched by war. But Jack had learned by now that appearances could be deceiving. Trellis 7 had become a hotbed of rebellion, with a growing faction of the population questioning Valara's rule. If she was going to keep her empire intact, she couldn't afford any instability. Jack stood on the edge of a transport ship, staring out at the planet's surface as the ship descended toward the city below. He was dressed in the uniform of Valara's elite guards, his appearance sharp and imposing. The ship's engines hummed softly as they cut through the atmosphere, descending quickly. Despite the calm exterior, Jack's thoughts were racing. He had never been on a mission like this before. It wasn't just about fighting. It wasn't about killing the enemy. It was about control. Valara had made that clear. And now, Jack was being sent to handle a situation that could have far-reaching consequences for the Empire. This wasn't a battle. This was diplomacy, though it wasn't the kind he was used to. He had been given instructions to meet with a local leader, someone who had been stirring unrest among the people of Trellis 7. His mission was simple: stop the rebellion by any means necessary. If negotiation failed, force would be the only option. The idea made Jack uneasy. He had always believed in fighting for what was right, for justice. But here, on this planet, things weren't that simple. There was no clear line between right and wrong. There were only choices, and every choice had a price. The transport ship touched down in the heart of the city. It was a sprawling metropolis, its tall buildings casting long shadows over the streets. The people here looked peaceful at first glance, but there was a tension in the air, something that couldn't be ignored. Jack could feel it, like an electric charge hanging just out of reach. This wasn't just a rebellion. It was a movement. Something that had been growing beneath the surface for a long time. Jack stepped off the ship, his boots thudding against the concrete. The streets were busy, but there was an undercurrent of unease. People watched him as he walked past, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and fear. The rebellion had made it clear that they didn't want Valara's rule. They didn't want her empire. But Jack wasn't here to make friends. He was here to restore order. He was met by a small group of soldiers, humans and aliens alike, who had been stationed on Trellis 7. They were nervous, but they followed Jack's lead without question. He had become the new face of authority, and whether they liked it or not, they were going to have to trust him. "Sir, the meeting is set up," one of the soldiers, a human man named Lucas, said quietly. "The rebel leader is expecting you." "Good," Jack replied. "Let's get this over with." They made their way through the city to a large government building that had been converted into a temporary headquarters for the rebels. As they entered, Jack could hear the murmurs of the people inside, their voices low but filled with defiance. This wasn't just a group of dissidents. These were people who truly believed they could overthrow Valara's empire. The rebel leader, a woman named Kira, stood at the center of the room, flanked by her closest allies. She was a tall woman with dark, intense eyes that never left Jack's face as he entered. Her posture was confident, her hands clasped behind her back as if she were a commander preparing for battle. And in a way, she was. But her battle wasn't against an army. Her battle was against a system, a regime that she believed was corrupt and tyrannical. Jack's first impression of her was that she was no different from any other leader he had encountered. She was determined, driven, and unyielding in her beliefs. But there was something else about her, something that made him uneasy. She wasn't just fighting for freedom. She was fighting for something deeper, something that Jack couldn't quite understand. "You're the human sent to restore order," Kira said, her voice calm but filled with an edge. "Tell me, what makes you any different from the soldiers who came before you?" Jack didn't flinch. He had been asked similar questions before. "I'm here to end the bloodshed. I'm not your enemy, Kira, but I won't let you destroy what's been built. The rebellion ends here, today." She didn't respond immediately, her eyes scanning him as if she were looking for a crack in his armor. Then she spoke again, her voice laced with bitterness. "You speak like one of them, like a tool for Valara's empire. But you're not one of us. You'll never understand what it's like to live under the boot of a tyrant." Jack's expression remained neutral, but inside, he was beginning to understand more than he wanted to. Kira wasn't just a rebel leader. She was a symbol of everything Valara's empire had done wrong. She was the face of the resistance, a leader of people who had been pushed too far. And now, Jack was caught between them, between the empire that had taken him in and the rebellion that sought to tear it down. "Maybe I don't understand," Jack said after a long pause. "But I know what it means to fight for survival. I know what it means to protect the ones you love. That's why I'm here. To protect the people of this planet. Not just from Valara's empire, but from the chaos that comes when there's no one left to lead." Kira's eyes softened slightly, but the resolve in her face never wavered. "You'll fail," she said quietly. "You're too late. The people are already rising against you. Against Valara." Jack could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. He wasn't sure if he was here to stop the rebellion or if he was already too deep in Valara's world to ever escape. But there was something else in Kira's eyes, a challenge. She wanted him to see things her way. She wanted him to understand that there was more to this war than loyalty to Valara. There was the fight for freedom. "I'm not here to destroy your people," Jack said, his voice steady. "But I will end this rebellion one way or another." Kira smiled, though it was far from friendly. "We'll see about that." The days that followed the meeting with Kira were tense. Jack's mission on Trellis 7 had become far more complicated than he had anticipated. The rebellion was growing stronger by the hour, and every move he made seemed to fuel the fire. But Jack wasn't one to back down. He had a job to do, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. The first step was to gain control of the city's central hub, where the rebel forces had established their headquarters. Kira had made it clear that she would not back down, and if Jack wanted to end the rebellion, he would have to break their resolve. Valara's orders were simple: eliminate the threat, restore order. But Jack's own feelings were more complex. He couldn't help but sympathize with the people of Trellis 7. They had suffered, just like his own people had suffered during the war. But in the end, he had to do what was necessary to protect the greater good. The city's streets were quiet when Jack and his squad moved in. The rebellion had grown into a well-organized force, but they were still outnumbered. Jack's unit was small, but they were experienced. They moved quickly, silently, and with purpose. The goal wasn't to destroy the city. Jack wasn't here to level it like a battlefield. His goal was to subdue the rebels, to show them that their fight was futile. They reached the central hub by nightfall, a towering structure in the heart of the city. It was surrounded by barricades, guarded by rebels armed with whatever they could find. But Jack's team was prepared. They moved in, taking out the guards with precision. Jack's heart raced, but his mind was focused. He had done this 1,000 times before. The mission was clear. As they made their way inside, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The silence in the building was unsettling. It was as if the rebels were waiting for them. The further they went, the heavier the air felt. It wasn't just a rebellion they were up against. It was a symbol of everything they had lost: their homes, their families, their freedom. The door to the central chamber opened, and Jack stepped inside, his rifle at the ready. Kira was standing at the far end of the room, flanked by her closest allies. She didn't look surprised to see him. "So the human has come to finish the job," Kira said, her voice steady but filled with disdain. "What will you do, soldier? Kill us all and claim victory, or will you see the truth in our cause?" Jack didn't respond immediately. He had seen enough of this fight to know that words weren't going to solve anything. The rebellion wasn't about ideals anymore. It was about survival. It was about a people who had nothing left to lose. "I'm not here to kill you, Kira," Jack said, his voice low. "I'm here to end this before it goes any further." Kira's eyes narrowed, her hands clenched at her sides. "You don't get it, do you? You're a tool of Valara's empire. You're just another cog in the machine. I'm fighting for something bigger than your empire. I'm fighting for freedom." Jack took a step forward, his mind clear. "I'm not fighting for Valara. I'm fighting for the people of Trellis 7. I'm fighting to end the bloodshed. This war isn't just about you or me. It's about the lives that will be lost if we don't stop." There was a long pause as Kira studied him. For a moment, Jack thought she might actually listen, but then she shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her face. "You still don't get it. You'll never understand. You've chosen your side, and I've chosen mine. There's no turning back now." With a swift motion, she raised her hand, signaling her rebels to take up arms. Jack's squad tensed, ready for a fight. The air grew, thick with anticipation. This was it, the moment of truth. But just as the tension reached its peak, the door to the chamber slammed open, and a figure stepped inside. It was Lady Valara. She walked into the room, her presence commanding and undeniable. The rebels immediately went silent, eyes fixed on her. Valara's eyes swept across the room, her gaze lingering on Kira, then shifting to Jack. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet authority in the way she stood. "You've done well, Sergeant Donovan," Valara said, her voice echoing in the room. "But it's time to end this." Kira stepped forward, her fists clenched. You're the one who's caused all this pain. You and your empire. I will never bow to you." Valara's gaze never wavered. "You misunderstand, Kira. This isn't about bowing to anyone. This is about survival, about keeping your people safe. You can either continue this fight and destroy everything you've built, or you can join us and build a future. The choice is yours." For a moment, the room was still, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Kira looked between Valara and Jack, her expression torn. Jack could see the conflict in her eyes, the same conflict he had felt when he first joined Valara's side. She didn't want to surrender, but she didn't want to see her people destroyed. "Either. I won't be a puppet of your empire," Kira spat. Valara stepped closer, her tone turning colder. "Then you leave me no choice." Before anyone could react, Valara raised her hand, and the room seemed to vibrate with the power she commanded. The air shimmered with an almost tangible force. The rebels took a step back, fear overtaking their defiance. Kira's face twisted with anger and frustration, but she stood her ground. "You've made your choice," Valara said, her voice final. Without warning, the tension broke. The rebellion was over. The rebels dropped their weapons, some of them bowing their heads in defeat, while others stood with clenched fists, too proud to admit their loss. Jack stood at the edge of the room, watching as Valara calmly surveyed. The aftermath. She had won, not by brute force, but by understanding the deeper truths of power. It wasn't about strength. It was about knowing when to fight and when to let go. As the room settled, Jack realized something. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He wasn't just fighting for Valara. He was fighting for the people who needed to be protected, whether they understood it or not. Valara turned to Jack, her expression softening slightly. "You did well, Sergeant. I knew you would understand." Jack nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He had done what was necessary. But at what cost?